had to realize that I was worth loving, loving, loving. I had to realize that I was worth loving, loving, loving.
Hello, and welcome back to another question and answer session of the Worth Loving podcast. I am your host, Keana W. Mitchell, and I am so happy that you're here with me today. So every Thursday, we take the conversation from our main podcast episode, and we go a little deeper by answering your questions. Questions about healing, relationships, boundaries, self-worth, and the emotional work that comes with rebuilding your life after heartbreak. This space is trauma-informed, it's emotionally grounded, and judgment-free. And I want you to feel safe here. I want you to feel seen. I want you to feel heard. And I want you to know that whatever you're navigating, whatever you're going through, you are not navigating it or going through this alone. So this week's main episode, yesterday, was all about why closure isn't always necessary after a breakup or the end of a marriage. It's a topic that so many people go through, so many people have had breakups and had divorces and ended their marriage, right? And they needed that closure. So it's a topic that resonates with many of us. And the questions that came in were powerful. They were vulnerable and deeply human. So today we're going to talk through some of these questions with compassion and clarity, because closure is one of those things that keep people stuck for months or even years, especially when the ending was painful or confusing. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you that the very first mini drop from my alter ego, Emery Rose, our podcast artist, is coming out on tomorrow, which is March 27th, on all streaming platforms. I do have the link in the show notes to pre-save it. This project is all about reclaiming your voice, honoring your healing journey, and I cannot wait for you to listen to it. All right, so let's get into today's questions. But before we do that, I do want to do a quick recap of the main episode that we had yesterday, because I feel that's important for us to have an idea of what we're talking about and to answer the questions in case you missed the episode yesterday. But you can always go back and listen to it, but we're just going to do a recap, okay? So yesterday, we talked about the idea of closure, what we think it is versus what it actually is and what it does. We talked about why closure is something another person can't always give us. And many of us grew up believing that closure is this final conversation where everything suddenly makes sense. We can always imagine the other person, well, I know I did. I would imagine the other person apologizing to me, telling me how sorry they were that they hurt me. Maybe tears were involved because they're like, yeah, I didn't realize that I hurt you this bad. They validated my experience and it helped me move on. But I have to say, I have never received closure as of yet. So closure is something that may not always happen, and closure really works that way. And for many people, especially those who have been in toxic or emotionally unsafe relationships, seeking closure can actually reopen wounds or keep you tied to someone who isn't good for your healing. So we talk about how closure is often an internal process, something we heal and deal with on the inside, not an external event. It's something you create for yourself, not something someone else hands you. And we explored why people simply cannot get closure. It could be because of emotional immaturity, avoidance, lack of accountability, right? Or a completely different understanding of the relationship. We also talked about healing alternatives to closure, like writing unsent letters, naming the lessons you learned, identifying the patterns, and choosing boundaries that protect your peace. So today's questions build on those ideas. They're honest, they're vulnerable, and they reflect the real emotional struggle that many of us face when we're trying to move forward without the answers that we hope for. I want to take a moment to share something that can support you if you're ready to go deeper in your healing journey. My 12-week trauma-informed coaching program, You Are Worth Loving, is designed specifically for women who are healing from emotional abuse, rebuilding self-trust, and learning how to choose relationships that feel safe, healthy, and aligned. Inside the program, we work together to help you understand your attachment patterns, rebuild your sense of worthiness, learn how to set boundaries without guilt, break free from cycles of emotional unavailability, strengthen your intuition, and create a vision for healthy love. This isn't a surface level program, it's deeply supportive, emotionally safe, where you can heal at your own pace. You'll receive weekly coaching, guided exercises, and tools rooted in research from leading psychiatrists. Their work on attachment, trauma, and self compassion forms the foundation of the program. Some of the psychologists we will be using their research on is Dr. Sue Johnson, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and Dr. Kirsten Neff. Their work is amazing, and I've used a lot of it in the podcast. So this is what we use to build our program and to make sure that people who are in the program get the help that they need. If you've been listening to this podcast and thinking, I know what I need to do, but I don't know how to actually do it, then this program is for you. You don't have to navigate healing alone. You don't have to guess your way through dating or relationships. You deserve support, clarity, and a roadmap. So, if you're interested in joining the next class, stay tuned. Enrollment opens soon, and I would love to walk alongside you on this journey. Now, let's get back into today's episode. Okay, so question number one asks, how do I stop wanting closure from someone who hurt me? This is such a real and honest question, and I want you to know that wanting closure doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you're human. When someone hurts us, especially someone we love deeply, our brain naturally wants resolutions, right? It wants the story to make sense. It wants the pain to feel justified. It wants reassurance that we were not the problem. But here's the part that's often hard to accept. The person who hurt you is often the least capable person of giving you the closure you need or the closure you're looking for. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they don't have the emotional capacity or the self awareness or the accountability to offer it. So, how do you stop wanting closure from them? You can start by understanding what the desire for closure is really about. A lot of times, closure is like this big umbrella, right? It's this all encompassing word. But a lot of the times, what we don't want is closure. There's a desire that we want or need that has nothing to do with closure. Most of the time, it's not even about the conversation. It's about the need underneath that conversation. So maybe you want validation. Maybe you want clarity. Maybe you want reassurance. Maybe you want to feel like your pain mattered. Once you understand and you name your need or the need that you're searching for, then you can start meeting it in a healthy way. Like, if you need validation, you can have self-validation. And self-validation could look like, my feelings were real. My experience was real. You can have reality-based closure. And we talked about this in the podcast yesterday. So if you don't get it here, you can always go back and listen to yesterday's episode of the podcast. Now, reality-based closure is when you say things like, this relationship ended because it wasn't healthy for me. Boundary-based closure can look like, I don't need to be open communication to heal. Internal clarity could mean, or you can say, I can make sense of my story without their explanation. So you don't have to stop wanting closure overnight, but you can stop seeking it from someone who has already shown you that they cannot care for your heart. So let's move to the next question. All right, question number 2. Okay, this is a good one. What if I feel like I can't move on until I get answers? Now, this feeling is common, so please don't think it's strange. This is a common feeling, especially after a painful breakup or divorce. When something ends abruptly or without clarity, your mind naturally tries to fill in the gaps. You replay conversations, you analyze the behavior, you try to understand what went wrong, and it can feel like you're stuck in this loop until you get the answers that you need. But here's the truth. Answers from the other person rarely bring the relief we imagine, even when people do explain themselves. Their explanation doesn't match the emotional reality you lived through. It may feel incomplete, dismissive, or even confusing, and sometimes their version of the story is shaped by their own guilt, shame, or avoidance, and not the truth. I know, like personally, there have been times when what I experienced was way different than what the other person was able to admit to, apologize for. They were just not emotionally able to do that. So, what do you do when you feel like you can't move forward without answers? And the answer to this is you shift the question. Instead of asking, like, why did this happen? You ask, what do I need now? It's kind of like you have to reframe this, right? So you can instead focus on what the relationship taught you, the patterns you want to break, the boundaries you want to strengthen, and what kind of love you want moving forward. This is important because this reframing can absolutely help. It can also help to look at the breakup as a gift, right? Sometimes we are in situations and relationships that are toxic and not good for us, but we don't really see it because we're in it, right? And so when that person decides to break up with us or if they decide to leave, it can actually be a gift for us to move forward and have the healing that we need, and then eventually have the relationship that we desire that is healthy. You can also remind yourself that unanswered questions doesn't mean that your healing is on hold. You can move forward with incomplete information. You can heal without their version of the story. You can create your own clarity based on what you experience and not what they're willing to admit. I know there have been times when I said, okay, even though this person is not willing to admit this, that, or the other, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So just because someone may not be able to give you closure or answers, it doesn't mean that what you experienced in that relationship did not happen. It doesn't mean that the pain that they caused you didn't happen. It just means that they are unable to give you what you need because of their own emotional immaturity, or they're just not able to have, they don't have that emotional capacity to just give you what you need. So in this situation, I would suggest like reframing and kind of look at the breakup as a gift, because when you look at something as a gift that you need to unwrap, it can absolutely change how you look at things. So instead of looking for answers, you're focusing on what the relationship taught you, the patterns you want to break, and boundaries you want to strengthen, and what kind of love you want moving forward. So this can all be helpful. All right, question number 3. Is it wrong to want closure even if I know I shouldn't reach out? Absolutely not. No, not at all. Wanting closure is just a natural emotional response. And even though I'm talking about how closure isn't always necessary, there have been times I wanted closure for different things in my life and different relationships. So it doesn't mean that you're going backwards. It doesn't mean you're weak. It just means that you're trying to make sense of a situation or something that hurt you. The conflict you're feeling, the desire for closure, but the awareness that reaching out isn't healthy is actually a sign of growth, right? Because it means you're listening to your boundaries. It means you're honoring your healing. It means you are choosing yourself even when your emotions are pulling you in another direction. And we know that sometimes our emotions and our heart will tell us to do things that we know are not healthy for us, right? And our mind is saying, no, don't do this. So this is kind of what you're experiencing. So your heart is telling you, hey, you need clarity, you should reach out. But your mind's like, no, 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 no. This was not a healthy situation. Do not reach out. So it's normal. And the fact that you are having this, it just means that you're honoring your healings. And that is very important because you're choosing yourself. So, how do you handle the desire without acting on it? You can give that feeling somewhere to go, somewhere safe to go. I know a lot of times when kids are acting up, right, and kids are just doing the most, as adults, we have to redirect them, right? So sometimes we have to do that with our emotions. We have to redirect our emotions and give it a safe place to go. So a safe place for your emotions to go right now might be writing an unsent letter where you say everything you wish you could say in that letter. And by doing this, you are releasing these emotions, but you don't have to make contact with that person. You can talk through the conversation with a therapist or a trusted friend. I am a fan of therapy, okay? I'm a fan of coaching. I'm a fan of talking, because sometimes when we talk and we say our thoughts out loud, then it can definitely help us put things in perspective, especially if you're talking to a therapist or a coach or a trusted friend. Sometimes that outside perspective can mean everything, and it can help us make rational decisions instead of emotional decisions. You can journal the questions you want to ask, and then you can answer them from your own truth. And once again, you don't have to reach out to that person. You can also remind yourself why you set the boundary of no contact in the first place. Reaching out for closure can reopen old wounds, and it sometimes can be the thing that pulls you back into old unhealthy patterns, but it can also give that person power over your healing. However, acknowledging the desire without acting on it, that is emotional maturity. That's self respect. So it's important for us to always put our healing and ourselves first. And by doing that, in this situation, maybe reaching out may not be a good idea, but we can definitely give our feelings a safe place to go by writing that letter, having that conversation with a therapist or friend or coach, journaling your questions and answering it from your truth, or reminding yourself why you set that boundary in the first place. All right, question number 4. How do I rebuild trust with myself after ignoring red flags? This is such an important question because sometimes we do start to doubt ourselves if we make a bad decision in a relationship or a financial goal or something like that, right? And this is normal. It happens. This question comes up a lot because when a relationship ends, especially one where you ignore red flags, it's easy to turn that pain inward and start questioning your judgment. And you can wonder why you stayed. You can start to wonder why you didn't see it sooner. You wonder if you can trust yourself again. But here's the truth. People ignore red flags for very human reasons because we have hope. We're attached. We are familiar, right? We have a fear of being alone. Emotional conditioning, wanting to believe the best in someone. And a lot of times we do want to believe the best in people. We want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So ignoring red flags doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your judgment. It just means that you were trying to love with the information and emotional tools that you had at the time, right? So rebuilding self-trust starts with compassion. You cannot shame yourself into trusting yourself again. And I would encourage you not to shame yourself, okay? We rebuild trust the same way you would with anyone else, through small, consistent actions. So you can rebuild trust with yourself by listening to your gut feeling, even when it whispers. Honoring your boundaries, even when it's uncomfortable. Pay attention to patterns and not promises. Watch actions and not listen so much to words. You can make decisions that protect your peace. So every time you choose yourself, you strengthen your self-trust. Every time you honor a boundary, you reinforce your inner safety. Every time you walk away from something that doesn't feel right, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted. I kind of like to think about it like going to the gym, right? When you first go, you might have a hard time with the exercises, right? Let's say you're trying to lift weights. So when you first go, maybe 5 pounds is heavy, right? But you keep doing it. And then eventually you can move up to 10 pounds or 15 or 20. And then eventually you can get to 100, 200, 300, right? But you can't just go into the gym and just pick up 500 pounds and be like, I did it. That's not how it works. And that is not how it works when it comes when we rebuild self-trust, right? We have to do it small. It might be one day listening to your gut feeling telling you, hey, instead of taking that way, drive this way. And you listen to it and you find out you missed the train. Or it can be the next time someone tries to throw something on you at the last minute and you already have plans, you're able to say, you know what, I can't do that. I already have plans. It could be something like that. It could be paying attention to patterns and not someone's promises. So each small, consistent thing that you do to rebuild trust, whether it's listening to your gut, honoring your boundaries, paying attention to patterns, making decisions that protect your peace, each time you do that, you are rebuilding your trust in yourself. And the more you do that, the more you will be able to one day have complete trust in yourself and your decisions. Every time you choose yourself, you strengthen your self-trust. Every time you honor a boundary, you reinforce your safety, right? Your inner safety. Every time you walk away from something that doesn't feel right, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted. Okay, question number 5. What if I still miss someone who wasn't good for me? This is a good question, and it's so real because, missing someone who wasn't good for you is one of the most confusing parts of healing, right? The relationship wasn't healthy. They couldn't meet your needs. That ending was necessary, and yet you still miss them. This doesn't mean that you want them back, okay? So let's make sure we understand this does not mean that you want them back or should get them back, right? It doesn't mean that you made a mistake by letting them go or walking away from the relationship. It means that you're human, okay? Missing someone is all about attachment, not compatibility, and not about safety or if something was healthy. It is about the emotional bond, not the reality of the relationship. When you miss someone who wasn't good for you, I would suggest that you try to separate what you missed from what actually happened. Because two things can be true at the same time, right? You can miss a person while knowing that they are not healthy for you, right? So I would suggest that you look at what you missed about the person, right? You can ask yourself questions like, do I miss the person or do I miss the moments of connection? And you see how those two things are different, right? So you may not actually miss the person, but you may miss the moments of connection. You can ask yourself, do I miss the relationship or do I miss the version of myself that I hoped could be with them? So it's important to ask yourself these questions because missing someone doesn't mean the relationship was right. It means your heart is grieving the loss of what you hoped for, what you hoped it could have been. Maybe the marriage you hoped could happen, right? Maybe the kids you hoped you would have one day with this person. And this is just a sign of grief. And grief, however, is not a sign that you should go back. It's a sign that you're healing, okay? So that is pretty much what it means if you miss that person, even if you know that they're not good for them. You may not actually be missing that person, but you might be missing parts of the relationship, like the connection that you felt in the relationship. I hope this makes sense. All right, good. Question number 6. How do I stop replaying the breakup in my mind? Oh, this is an amazing question. Okay, so what you are describing is called rumination. Rumination is a trauma response. So when something painful happens, your brain tries to make sense of it by replaying it over and over. The best way for me to explain this is like if you watch football or basketball, they have like instant replay. Now, I don't know about any other sports because I typically just watch football or basketball when I do watch sports, but I do know that they have like instant replay, right? They keep watching it over and over and over to see what happened in that play so that they can give the right team the right points, right? So our mind does this as well. If we are in a relationship and something painful happens, our brain will try to make sense of it and figure out what happened by playing it over and over and over again. So when this happens, it's not like you're trying to torture yourself. You're just trying to protect yourself. It thinks, your mind, it kind of thinks that if it understands what happened, it can prevent it from happening again. But unfortunately, replaying the breakup doesn't actually bring clarity. It keeps you stuck in moments of pain. It can reopen old wounds. It can do a lot of damage, right? So to interrupt the loop, you can try a few grounding strategies. You can do sensory grounding, which is notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, right? Because that interrupts your mind from thinking and ruminating about that breakup. You can do thought interruption. When the replay starts, gently say, not right now, and redirect your focus. You can reframe. Instead of saying, why did this happen to me? You can ask yourself, what do I need right now? You can have time limited reflection, right? So you can give yourself like a time, right? I say maybe like 10-minute window to reflect. Then you can close the journal and move on. And I think this is very important to do and know. I know like what I do when I find myself ruminating, I say to myself, Keana, this is not allowed in this house, or you cannot bring that into this space. I give myself one small place where I could ruminate for like 10 minutes. And then after that, I'm like, okay, this is not allowed here. You cannot, don't bring it in here. Because a lot of times we are letting these relationships live rent free in our mind. And I don't like that idea of anything living rent free in my head. And even though I do understand it's a trauma response, there are some things that I find myself doing. Like I love the sensory grounding because it takes my mind off of what I'm thinking about. I like thought interruption. And I absolutely love reframing because when I can reframe something, it helps out a lot because it helps me to realize, okay, well, this did happen, but what do I need right now? What do I need to do for me? How can I meet this need in this moment? So these are just some things that you're doing because your brain is just really trying to protect you. But you can also teach your brain new ways to feel safe. And over time, the replays will become less frequent and less intense. All right, well, that was the end of my questions for today. Guys, thank you so much for spending time with me today. These questions were powerful, they were honest, and deeply human. Closure is one of the hardest parts of healing because it touches that part of us that wants understanding, validation, and emotional safety. But you don't need someone else to give you these things. You can create them within yourself and for yourself. Your healing is yours. Your clarity is yours. Your peace is yours. And just remember, guys, that you don't always need closure to heal and move on. Until next week, have an amazing day and a wonderful weekend. Bye bye.
I had to realize that I was worth loving, loving, loving. I had to realize